Hey guys, my name is Mark, and it's great to be with you today as we continue in our series all about fruitful families. And as I get going today, I got something really good to tell you about families, and then something kind of difficult to tell you about families. First, the good news, the good thing, is that we are created to have relationships and experience life with others as we walk through each day of our life. Now the difficult part. We are created to experience life and relationships with others as we walk through each day of our life. Yeah, the reality is that sometimes when we think about family relationships, we think, man, it can be so good. And other times we think it can be really difficult. And the reality is we're all relational. Like, we're all relational beings. We all need relationships, but some of us are more relational maybe than others. We're all a little different on that. I know my wife, Jen, and I, we're a little bit different. Like, I like a large crowd of people. I have fun with that. It kind of energizes me. I enjoy that. And she's kind of like, well, that's okay, but I'd rather have a one-on-one conversation with one person. And she is really good at that and loves that a lot better. But the reality is we all need other people. We all need other relationships in our life. And many of the relational connections we see in the Bible are all about families. You see, God is the one that actually created families and created the family structure. And the Bible gives us some direction on how those family relationships can go and how we're to treat one another. And we may have some family members that we absolutely love, and we feel love from them, and we find joy in moments when we have our time with family members. But there are certainly times family relationships can be difficult, right? They can get kind of messy sometimes, and sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes we feel so much love from a family member, or we love them, but sometimes those very same people can drive us crazy, or they're kind of annoying, or it stirs up some anger, and sometimes there's a lot of hurt involved with family relationships. Oftentimes, the best parts of life and the worst parts of life have to do with our family relationships, right? And the kind of relationships we're talking about in this series are lots of family relationships, like if you're married, or if you have kids, or if you have parents, or if you're a grandparent or siblings. Like, there's all kinds of family relationships. And as we follow Jesus and we're striving in that relationship and live in our family relationships, we're wanting to look at this month something called the fruits of the Spirit. There are some things that are in the Bible for us to shoot for, something that gives us some guidance. And if I'm in a relationship with Jesus, he tells us we actually have these fruits that we can produce in our lives. And those fruits can help us in how we treat each other in our families. So we're going to look at Galatians 5, chapter 22. This is kind of our verse for the month. It says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. See, these fruits in our lives can give us some focus, give us some things to strive for. And it's something we can shoot for when things in our family are going great, and there's love and there's peace, but also when things are difficult and it's even hurtful sometimes. So each week we're looking at a different one of these fruits of the Spirit, and today we're going to look at faithfulness. Like, what does faithfulness look like in family relationships? I think some people would say, like, it's about being loyal. Like, you're loyal to the family, right? Like, we stay at it no matter what, through the ups and the downs. We stay at it. Or maybe it means you don't drop the ball on your relationship with them. Like, you don't bail on it just because things get tough, or you stay at it. I mean, you just got to stay engaged. But being faithful in our families can also be a way that we honor God. Because when we're faithful to our families, we're allowing God to work in our lives and to work in their life as well. In the book of Proverbs of the Bible, it's actually a book that has lots of wisdom in it. And in those verses we see that they talk a lot about wisdom in various relationships. And we're going to look at a few of those today. Proverbs 3:3 says, "Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck and write them on the tablet of your heart." Man, it talks about this faithfulness, like let it never leave you. You got to keep that close. Faithfulness in relationships, it's not an option. We just got to stay at it. And when we have faithfulness in our families, man, it can do so much. It can bring hope to people in our family members who maybe are feeling discouraged. It can reassure the family member that you're there for them when they go through a difficult time. It can build trust in our family relationships. It can make our relationships stronger. But the reality is, in our family relationships, there are good days and there's going to be difficult ones. There's going to be good months and difficult months. There's going to be good seasons and difficult seasons. And those people in your family, they are going to go through different seasons. They're going to go through some changes. They're going to have some struggles, and you will too. So we're coming up here on a 3-year anniversary next month, March 2020. It's an anniversary we're not really wanting to celebrate because that's kind of when COVID started and the beginning of the pandemic and shutdowns and all those things. And we all have bad memories, right, of when this all happened. And as much as we think or we want things to be back to normal, kind of like just like things were before, as much as we want that to happen and get there, it's not the same. And it will never be like it was 3 years ago. And maybe there's some parts of our lives we feel like, oh, that's kind of back to normal. The reality is things have changed, right? And yeah, there's things that have changed in our lives that have been caused by COVID. It has had a rippling effect throughout our culture and throughout our communities. And those changes are permanent. And some of us kind of need to accept this new reality. We may not like it, we may not want it, but our world and our community, our culture, it has changed. And accepting change is hard sometimes, right? But a lot of the changes we've experienced over the last 3 years weren't caused by the pandemic. Now, maybe the pandemic accelerated them or exposed some things, but many of the changes that you and I have gone through would have happened regardless of a pandemic. Like the kids still would have gotten older. Our parents would have gotten older. Our financial situation still would have changed. Our workplace environment still would have changed. There's always going to be changes in our lives. You know, one of the things that comes to mind when I think about March of 2020, something that happened in our family that was just a difficult season was our son, youngest son, was away at college, his senior year. And it was a great experience for him, and he had 3 months to go and moving towards graduation, built some great friendships, and they told him, I said, hey, you gotta leave campus in 3 days. It's over, you gotta go home. And he moved back in with mom and dad, and he finished college on a laptop computer in his parents' basement. And that was difficult for him because he had already left home and started his own path and kind of his own trajectory of rhythms of life that he wanted to experience. And then it came to an abrupt ending, and now back home, it meant for some tough, difficult moments in relationships with us. And not only that, but Jen and I had our own things we're figuring out. Like Jen had to learn how to teach piano lessons online. Like we never knew what Zoom was. She had to figure that out and deal with all of her students. And then of course the journey, we couldn't meet in person. And so it's like, okay, how do you lead a church when you're not supposed to be together? We're all dealing with these changes that came rapidly. And I remember Jen wrote a couple words on our little chalkboard in our entryway. She just wrote the words grace and forgiveness. And it was very wise of her because she was indicating, listen, right now, we got to offer each other and ourselves a lot of grace and forgiveness. Colossians 3:13 says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And that was a difficult season for us, and you had those as well, some of them far worse and much more difficult. We all have memories of, man, that was really difficult. And during the time, we said some things we probably shouldn't. We did some things we kind of regret. But if you have grace and forgiveness, that's going to help you stay faithful in your relationships. Because we're all going to mess up. We're all going to make mistakes. But if we can offer each other and ourselves some grace and forgiveness, it will help you to stay faithful. Living out faithfulness in relationships, it means that we're all going to go through some different seasons, like I said, right? And some changes. And that means we have to commit to learning and growing as well. If we're changing and going through different seasons, and if our family members are too, then we're going to have to grow and learn as we go. And this could be hard, right? Because we like things the way they are. We get into our own habits, our own routines, we have our own thinking patterns, and changing and learning and growing is often difficult. And right now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about someone in your family that maybe it's kind of difficult right now, or it's been difficult for a while. And I want you to think about what are the changes they've had to go through over the last few months or a couple years. And I want you to think about yourself. What are some of the changes that you've had to go through over the last few months or years? My guess is when you think about that, it's probably something significant. And as we offer grace and forgiveness, we also have to do what's required of us to stay faithful. And sometimes that means we have to learn and we have to grow. For me, I feel like over the last 3 to 5 years, all of my relationships, my closest relationships, they have all changed in some way. And they're all in a different season right now than they were 5 years ago. For example, both of my sons, they have moved out of the house and they live in different cities. They have their own careers and kind of carving out their own adult path. And one of them has gotten married. So now I have a daughter-in-law. My wife and I, both of our parents in the last 5 years have gotten older, right? They're older than they were 5 years ago, which means we're finding that we need to kind of come alongside and help them more than we did 5 years ago. And even for me personally, like leading and working here at The Journey, like each of the last 5 years has required me to lead in a different way. Like each of the last 5 years, it's been different in how we lead here at The Journey because of things that have happened. And all those things that happen, I feel like they've been significant and it's affected my relationships. But what's requiring of me is I got to learn and I got to grow as I go. And sometimes for me, that's really difficult. But if I want to stay faithful to those relationships, I got to learn and I got to grow. And maybe another example that could be helpful to you is if you're a parent and you have kids, like your kids are different than they were 3 to 5 years ago, right? They have grown. Your kids have grown. And the question is, have you grown? Has your parenting shifted? Have you been learning and growing how to parent different as they get older? Because when they're young, like it's more directive, like you kind of have to tell them everything they got to do. And when they get a little older, you maybe give them some options. And as they move towards adult, they get some more freedoms, right? And so being faithful in a relationship means that you got to learn how to parent in each phase of their life and what that needs to be. And you got to stay engaged in that season and not disengaged just because you don't like the change or because it's difficult sometimes. So my question is, what do you need to learn? What do you got to learn as a grandparent? What do you have to learn? How do you have to grow as a parent of young kids or adult children? Or if you're a child, like as you're wanting to get older and have more freedoms, are you committed to staying faithful as you go through that change in that season? Are you committed to being faithful to your mom and dad as you go through that? You see, when we're willing to learn and grow, what you communicate to the other person is, I'm going to be faithful to you. I'm committed to you. I'm not going anywhere, even though this is difficult, even though we got to go through some changes right now. I'm willing to make some changes and learn and grow to stay faithful in our relationship. But what about when something really difficult happens? Like when they say something or they do something that is hurtful or it's selfish and you don't feel love from them. And it's because of their words or because of their actions. And it's something that it hasn't just happened like once or twice. I mean, it's been going on for months or maybe even years. Like when they do that and they don't respond the way you hope that they would, when conflict arises and you hate what they say or do, we may have thoughts of quitting the relationship. We may want to just avoid them or withdraw from the relationship. This is where we have to look at what does it mean to be unfaithful in a relationship? It's in other words, just look at being faithful, but what does it mean to be unfaithful? Like, what does that look like? It could mean we disengage verbally, or we just kind of shut down, right? We withdraw from them and we just say, I'm just not going to communicate with you. We maybe just disengage physically, like I'm just not going to be around them for a while. Or we let the other person do the parenting because there's too much conflict involved right now. I just want to deal with it. I don't let the other person do it. Or could mean withdrawing relationally and emotionally in your marriage because you don't like the tension that's there. Or avoiding the other person because you just don't want to deal with the conflict. You don't want to talk about it. You hope it's just going to resolve itself. Do not make withdrawing, disengaging, or avoiding an option because it is a form of unfaithfulness. Look at Proverbs chapter 17. Verse 17 says, "A friend loves at all times. A brother is born for a time of adversity." Part of what that tells us is that maybe when things get tough, when it gets difficult, that's when we need to be the most loyal. When it gets difficult and challenging, that's when our faithfulness has to go up, not disengage and not withdraw. So my wife and I, we have been married for over 30 years. And that tells you something about a level of faithfulness in our marriage, right? We've endured a lot. We've stayed married, and we've been together through a lot of different things. It's significant to say, hey, I've been married for 30 years. But that doesn't tell you everything. Because you can be married for 30 years and still have times of unfaithfulness where you disengage, or maybe you want to avoid a difficult situation with that person, or you withdraw emotionally when certain things happen. You know, I got to tell you that this last year, it's probably one of the tougher years for my wife and I. And just for various reasons. And I wouldn't say it's the toughest year, but it ranks up there. I mean, it's been kind of a tough one. And there are times when there's tendencies where we want to drift towards disengagement or withdraw. But we have decided that we're not going to break the relationship. Like, that's not going to be an option for us. And for you, when you think about this person in your life that it's difficult right now, when they've done hurtful or selfish things, I want you to remember you probably have more options than you think you do. You have more options than you think you do. And as much as it depends on you, don't break relationship. Don't break a relationship just because you believe something different than they do, or they do something you don't approve of. When your child behaves in a way that's consistently different than everything you've tried to teach them, don't disengage from them. Don't break a relationship. Or when your parents do things you don't agree with and you don't understand. Or when your spouse has said things or done things that seem kind of selfish, or maybe the things you consistently fight about, do everything you can, as far as it depends on you, to not break relationship. And you can do this. You can stay faithful. You can do this because Jesus has been faithful to you. He has done it for you. He has shown you how to do that. You see, instead of withdrawing or engaging, Jesus actually pursued us. Because we are sinful people, all of us. We all have sin. We all mess up. We know that. We all have times where we kind of push God to the side. There's times where we choose sin over him. There's times we hold him at a distance, or we avoid engaging in our relationship with him. We kind of keep him at arm's length. We withdraw from him sometimes. Like, we do all of those things. And so what did Jesus do when we're doing all of those things? Romans 5:8 tells us in the Bible. It says that God demonstrates his own love for us. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So while we were doing all of those things, what did he do? He actually moved towards us. Jesus came to earth to show us how to live a faithful life and die on a cross and rise from the dead to pay for our sin, to offer us grace and forgiveness. He didn't withdraw. He did not disengage. He was still faithful. He still loves. He moved towards us. And you can move towards them rather than withdrawing or avoiding. Unfaithfulness, it means you move away, you avoid, you disengage, and maybe even break a relationship. Faithfulness, it means you're going to move towards them. You're going to engage. You're still going to love them, and you're going to stay at it with them. And it's likely that in most situations, and not all, I get that. I mean, there are instances where things happen that causes relationships to break. But in most instances that we're kind of talking about in this series that cause us to think about quitting or avoiding or disengaging, most of those issues can be resolved. We may not see it right now. We may have to ask someone else for some help. We may have to take some time. We may have to learn and grow. One other thing that unfaithfulness can look like, it could be that we have too many other things that we are faithful to. Like, we may have too many things in our life that we own and we got to take care of. Our schedules may be too busy. Those kinds of things can sabotage your efforts towards faithfulness, because you can't be faithful to your family and faithful to your job, faithful to all your other friends, faithful to all your activities and all the hobbies and all the house projects you want to do, and we can't be faithful to all of those. We got to create margin in our life to be available, to have this unscheduled space in our life for our spouse or our kids or family members. And that kind of means like you have time with nothing planned. Now, some of us are better at this than others. I know that. But if you always have things to do, you always have some places to go, things you got to take care of, and you're always on the phone or always the TV's on and always having this activity, you're not allowing space to be available. So part of this faithfulness in families is being faithful as you go. Like, we have a job, or you have responsibilities, you have the chores, like we have these responsibilities. So part of it is being faithful as we go, but also part of it is being faithful to stop. And we say, I am stopping for you. I'm stopping for this relationship. Phones are put away, TV's off, unscheduled activities. We need downtime for ourselves anyway, right? We need breaks, we need times of rest, but we need also downtime for our families. And we might even think, well, I'm still married, or I'm still the parent. I'm just busy right now. But if you aren't available, you're actually less faithful. So limit these other aspects of your life so we can be more available. And that will help you stay faithful in your family. So what's faithfulness look like? It means staying at it for the long haul. It means not avoiding conflict. Sometimes we might misunderstand each other and we don't see how to resolve it. And it doesn't mean it can't be resolved. It just means we don't see it yet. Faithfulness means not making impulsive decisions about the relationship based upon a temporary emotion. And right now, there's some of you that are thinking about leaving. You're thinking about quitting the relationship or considering a step towards unfaithfulness. Maybe you've been hurt, and maybe it's been a long time. And I just want to say this too. If you're in a situation right now where there is some abuse going on, or you feel like you're in danger, or there is some severe circumstance, you need to get some help, like professional help, authorities, or go find a counselor and consider what your options are. I'm not considering or advocating that you stay in there and just take it. But in most cases where we all have relational challenges, when you feel frustrated, maybe even point of thinking, I just want to give up. I just want to disengage or avoid. Maybe physically leave. Stay engaged. Stay at it. Remember Proverbs 3, to let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind that around your neck. Write that on the tablet of your heart. I want to ask you to stay at it, to stay faithful. Do not break relationship. Look at the faithfulness of Jesus to you and apply that faithfulness to them where you're moving towards them. It doesn't mean you have to like everything that's happening or even approve of everything they're doing. But don't quit relationship. You keep at it. You keep learning. You keep growing. You offer grace and forgiveness. Keep navigating through the good days and the difficult ones. And these fruits of the Spirit we're talking about, commit to these fruits of the Spirit. Because when we do, it helps you to be faithful. Let's look at that verse one more time. Galatians 5:22. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So it's looking at those and asking questions like, okay, in each one of those, how can I learn to love the other better? What joy can you bring to the relationship? What peace can you commit to? How can you be patient with the other? What act of kindness or goodness can you do today? How can you be more gentle in your approach? How can you grow in self-control with your schedule and create more margin? See, developing and growing in all of those fruits are going to help you to stay faithful, to not quit, to dig in, and to be loyal and steadfast for the long haul. And when we are faithful in our family relationships, what does that look like as you walk through that on the other side? First of all, trust is going to be built in the relationship. And that will bring a greater sense of security for you and for everyone in your family. Staying faithful means that your relationship will be stronger. If you walk through something that's difficult, you stay at it, you keep learning and growing, the other side of that will be a stronger relationship. And probably most importantly, when we're faithful to those in our family, we see God working in you and in them, because you're doing exactly what Jesus has done with you. Even if it's still challenging, even if it's still difficult, you can experience a closer connection with Jesus because you're doing the same thing he did with you. Let's pray together. Jesus, first of all, we want to thank you that you were faithful to us. When we disengaged, when we avoided, or we keep you at arm's length, you still moved towards us. You still pursued relationship and was faithful in your relationship with us. And we ask for your help to move towards our family members. Help us to engage, to stay faithful, to be loyal, to learn and to grow as we need to, and to offer grace and forgiveness. Help us to be faithful to those in our families. Thanks for showing us how. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.